Welcome to the Codcast from Commonwealth Magazine. I'm Michael Jonas. When Beacon Hill legislators took up a big criminal justice bill recently, a lot of the usual voices were part of the debate. But one figure stood out because he is far better known for knocking down passes than lobbying lawmakers. Devin McCourty, the star free safety of the New England Patriots, has stepped up on the issue of criminal justice reform and become a passionate voice for change. We are delighted to have him join us here today for the Codcast. Devin McCourty, welcome and thanks so much for coming in.
Thanks for the invite.
So you were up on Beacon Hill lobbying on the bill that was recently passed, and I know you and some of the others in the Patriots organization were particularly focused on this issue of how we deal with young people in the criminal justice system, and you were advocating for sort of two parts that were being considered in that bill. One was to raise the age in which juvenile courts have jurisdiction from 7 to 12, and the other was to raise the age at the top end so that young people are not in the adult system until they're age 19. And I guess you got you're playing 500 ball, I guess you might say, because the bill did raise the age of juvenile court to 12. So was that felt good to get at least that part of it done?
Yeah, you know what's been interesting, I think, as a player, obviously not my expertise at all, and just sitting down with all the different people who have kind of dedicated their lifelong, careers, passions to learning this stuff, is they just keep reminding us that nothing will go, it won't go perfect right away. You won't get everything you ask for. These laws and different things have been this way for years. And to just think, one bill will pass and it'll just be done and, the world will be exactly how you want it is just not reality. So it's been encouraging just to see the needle move a little bit. And, we've been talking about raise the age for a while. And,
right.
I think for us as players, just getting behind that and adding to it, we were told was a big lift. So definitely some positivity leaving that and seeing the criminal justice reform bill passed and seeing the improvements was definitely positive.
Right. And so help us understand a little, like, what brought you to this issue. You're paid to play professional football, which you do quite well. There's nothing in your job description that calls on you to step out and speak up on these issues.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, especially when I started, I didn't think, I'd be at the State House talking to different people. That whole experience was different, just being, involved in that. And honestly, like myself and Troy Brown, we were talking as we going in. It was kind of like, whoa, we sure? Like, what are we doing here? And I would say it just started as a passion. I think you see different things going on around you. Players have been known for years as far as giving back to the community, whether it be, myself is sickle cell disease, different, guys, cancer. Dante Hightower does diabetes. Tom's great with the Best Buddies program. So I think, you've always seen players very involved in different charities and giving back. But I think as a whole, that's kind of very comfortable for people. It's kind of like, yeah, they should do those things. That makes sense. And I think a lot of us as players are kind of realizing, race is a huge issue. And not that we're realizing, I think we've always lived with it, but I think we're starting to see that we have a platform that can create change. And whether it was, a shooting or some type of incident that happened and, we saw the mass media blow it up. And I think that kind of got a lot of guys' attention, and it was kind of, what can we do? And, for myself, it started with Malcolm Jenkins texting me, that he wanted to get guys involved in doing something. And then him and Anquan Bolden started the Players Coalition. And then I realized that, it's a great way to get involved. They had already had the infrastructure. They started something. And what they were looking for was more players to get involved to really move it. And I think it's been great because so far everything we've done has been very organized, very strategic on, how to get people's attention, get the awareness, and then to actually get things done. So to me, it kind of started with something that obviously I live every day.
Right.
And then seeing something and deciding, I have a platform to make a change, now what's next? And I think, you've seen all of these steps as really us navigating. There's no blueprint to how to do this, but navigating on how we can help all these different communities.
Right. And I mean, certainly there are a lot of players have been involved in different causes, but it's also true that the issues that you've gotten involved with are ones that, can make people more uncomfortable. It's not quite the same as fundraiser for different,
Hmm.
medical causes and things like that. Has that been, difficult, or have you felt some of the pushback, going all the way up to the president's office around the issues of taking a knee and protesting what have been issues around police interactions with black communities.
Yeah, it hasn't been all easy and smiles. It's definitely been pushback. I think the encouraging part is it's been very open in our organization and supported by everyone. From the top, with our owner, Mr. Kraft, and then his son Jonathan Kraft, the president. Uh, Very supportive. Jonathan Kraft came to our first what we call listen and learn tour at Harvard Law, where we got to sit down for like 8 to 10 hours with different experts talking to us about different issues right here in Boston. To doing a panel with both the Krafts. So I think getting that support has been huge as far as knowing you're doing the right thing. But obviously, there's pushback. I think you just think back to, I guess that's 2 years ago now, when myself and Martellus Bennett raised a fist during the national anthem when we opened against Arizona, and seeing between my Twitter, Instagram, you seeing all that stuff, and then with our PR guy just showing me some of the feedback they were getting. You got definitely some positivity. Some people were all for it, but like anything, when you're talking about race, in this country, which is probably one of the most uncomfortable topics in the country, from both ends of people wanting to talk about it, some people believing it doesn't exist. You saw all types of things, some of the most racist things you could read. You saw like my Twitter handle, between just getting racial slurs and different things like that, I think was very encouraging, because you knew you were doing the right thing. That obviously
You
is
got some,
still,
some people's attention, I
it's
guess.
still a huge issue. So I think even with the backlash and everything, it's kind of proven that we're doing something that matters to people, and different people have reached out, and you saw things that have happened throughout Boston and the country, that has showed that you need people to go out there in the front line and try to create change.
And 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 just talk a little bit about how you said it's something that's unavoidable, that you certainly haven't escaped this issue about the issues around race and law enforcement. Well, I mean, what's been your own experience, or your own experience growing up in New York, outside the city, with police, or even now as an adult? What sort of what's that experience been?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. A couple years ago, I did a race and gender kind of panel that Andrea Kramer does right at Boston University, and one of the questions came up: do you think there's racism just in Boston? And Scalabrini was on it, and Scalabrini talked about how playing with like Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett and those guys, he saw like how much people loved them in the city. And I said to him, I said, but you got to think about it. You got guys walking around 6'6", 6'10". Like when they walk around, everyone knows who they are instantly.
Right.
I'm like, you got to go ask the average citizen who walks around when no one knows them. They don't know they're an athlete or anything. There's no celebrity importance to them, how they get treated. And, I just remember my first year here where, no one knew who I was. And this wasn't even a huge thing, but I remember being just at, the local Stop and Shop, and, going to take my card out, and there was an older lady walking. I was like, I'll let her walk by. And she walked by, and she just like paused and stared at me and looked me up and down. And I was like, I know there's not a lot of black people in the town, but like, am I doing something wrong by letting you walk by? Like, I'm thinking I'm being, courteous, and just, that feeling. And then 3 years later, after you have some success in football, how much that changes, and I think that still shows, where people, I don't think they can they necessarily wish ill intent towards you, but just to have a different vibe and feeling when they see you. And then I think for me growing up, I've never been involved in, something where, I felt like we were, attacked or anything physically. But so many like different small incidents. I remember in college being right on campus and waiting for the bus, and I was a freshman or sophomore, and a senior drives by in a car, and we just jump in his car because we know him, he's on the football team, and we drive, I mean, literally 2 or 3 blocks and turn left, and the cop pulls us over and says he didn't see a signal, and we're in the campus dining hall parking lot, and next thing you know, 3 cop cars pulling behind, lights flashing, yelling, "Get out the car!" And we're sitting there like we have book bags, like we're obviously college students, and we're like, what's the problem? And it was like, well, we don't know why you guys just hopped in the car. Like, what's going on here? And we're like, there's nothing going on here. We were waiting for the bus. We saw a friend. We jumped in the car, and it was kind of like, why do you need all of these cop cars here? We're on campus. Like, it's no problem. And I remember going. All of us having to go to the police department for a follow-up to speak to one of the head people in charge on how we felt and what we thought of that. Nothing came from it. But I remember just leaving that situation feeling like, was that normal? Was that not normal? I didn't think it was so, I didn't think it was so crazy that, it was, straight obvious profiling or something like that. But I think in the back of your mind, you're like, but was that profiling? Like, was that an issue? Like, I would think that's pretty normal on a college campus, someone jumping in a car and, riding, but you never know. And I think once you start to think about those different things, and, that wasn't like, we're talking 30, 40 years ago, that was 10 years ago when I was in college. And to still be talking about those topics now in 2018, I think just shows the importance of it.
Right. And for you, whether it's the game that you referred to with raising a fist, or the games in the last season taking a knee, what is it? What was the message, or what were you saying by that yourself?
Yeah, so I guess the bigger one was this year when we played Houston week 3. I think after the president's remarks towards Colin Kaepernick and other players that had been taking a knee at the time, a lot of guys throughout the league felt like even those guys took a knee, they were no different than us. We felt like when he said that, it was a kind of shot at our league and the players in it. And I do think responding just to him, I wouldn't say it was necessarily the right thing, because I don't think what Trump said should make us act a certain way. Like, the country is what it is. Like, how we felt shouldn't have been dictated by what he said. That's why I have so much respect for Kaepernick. Like, he did, what he did because of how he felt directly. But I do think what he did kind of opened a lot of people's eyes and made them decide, am I with what this guy is saying and what some people might believe in America, or am I totally against it? Because obviously there's no really middle ground where I can stand and say I support both of these things. And I thought, being involved in that and being a leader, a black guy on the team, a captain, once that happened, I'm in the locker room and I got everybody coming up to me like, well, what are we going to do? And I'm like, huh? Mm-hmm. And guys are like, whatever you want to do, like, that's what we want to do. Like, we fully support that. And I just remember like thinking like, this is what I feel we need to do. And still, to me, the reason why we took that knee was still to bring awareness to what was going on. But I do think taking a knee got so much media attention and so much direction to the wrong thing with the military and the men and women that fight for our country.
Right. Well, the president, I mean, he tried to frame it that way,
exactly,
right?
And
to his own benefit, frankly.
And that's why I thought going forward, like, let's not let this ship steer that way. If us taking a knee, you want to listen to what the president says and steer that ship directly towards it, all right, we'll find another way to get your attention. But Like, we have so many guys in that locker room that have parents, grandparents, siblings that have either fought or served their country, have lost their life to. Like, none of those players in there felt that way, and that's why I thought it was important moving forward that we find different ways to get the people that kind of agree with what we're talking about, give them a chance to listen to what we're actually talking about, and not, you know, understanding and thinking, you know, how the whole conversation was being hijacked, that then believing that was the truth, but bringing a real truth to them. So I thought that was important, you know, doing the listen and learn tours, and, you know, writing the op-ed with the crafts. That was a way where people can read that and see, like, okay, like, I'm not against what he's talking about. I'm actually for that. Like, I support that. And then next thing you know, like, we're not even talking about the military and the men and women that fight for our country. We've actually moved on to now where there is no escape. You know, you have to hear what this is and say, you know, like, I think it sounds crazy if you say, you know, yeah, I disagree, you know, that we should have 7-year-olds in court, you know,
Right.
being tried as a juvenile. You know, if you
Right.
support that, then you have to stand there and say, you know, I support that. And I think then you get people like, well, I don't want to say I support that, so I guess I am. So it's been really good, I think, being able to escape that hijacking of that national anthem and the different protests, and getting down to the actual truth.
Right. No, exactly. I mean, I think you frame it right, that the whole issue around the taking the knee was kind of seeing this play out sort of at 30,000 feet. And as you're saying, you know, when you drill down, there's some real things happening on the ground that those protests we're talking about, what we're seeing as sort of broad injustices in the system, but how we go about tackling them is going to. I'm kind of mindful every time I say tackling them. I don't, but you know, that we've got to do that sort of piece by piece,
Exactly.
as you were saying at the very beginning, that, you know, it's kind of a long battle. And so, you know, to bring it down to the ground level, talk a little bit about this issue that you've zeroed in on, and as you referenced, along with the team owner Robert Kraft and his son Jonathan Kraft, the three of you co-authored an op-ed that appeared in the Globe in February on this issue of raising the age. And so, what in particular makes you feel like that's, along with other changes that we might need? Why do you feel like that's an important step we could take to both not have kids that young in the juvenile court, but also at the upper end when you've got kids or young men and women? I mean, see, even in my language, I'm sort of showing that uncertainty. What do you call an 18-year-old? And I think that's, you know, and this idea that we shouldn't be, you know, just taking them and treating them the way we would a 30 or 35-year-old in the court system and the criminal justice system, and the effects that can have.
Yeah, it's been interesting just learning the different studies. You know, I think when we sat there in January, and even Jonathan Kraft, when he heard them say, you know, as early as 7 years old, he was like, "Wait, I don't get what you mean. Like, how can a 7-year-old understand what's being told to them in court?" And then you see studies show, you know, the brain's not fully developed until 25. So you're sitting here saying, well, are these kids then? We're talking about kids. So obviously everything is kind of, you know, a situation based, you know, different things happen. But I think as a whole, when you start talking about kids that are 17, 18 years old, and you know, we've been just seeing different things. You talk about like policing in school, and you get these kids that, you know, maybe act up in school, and then now, you know, they're sitting in the juvenile system. Now they're on probation. We've heard stories where, you know, kids can't even play sports because they have to have an ankle bracelet on, and they have to be inside by a certain time, and, you know, they have a game that runs late. Now the cops are at their door, and there's a problem. They're bringing a guy off the field. So I just think when we start talking about our youth being the future and having good education, being able to be fixtures in the community and be positive influences in the community, if we just throw them in a juvenile system and create this train of thought that, you know, I am what's around me, especially in these, you know, these poverty-stricken areas where, you know, there are, whether it's parents or uncles or, you know, just friends around them that are in and out of the criminal justice system, and that's all they see. And then now, you know, they're already thinking that's what the future holds, and then we created at 10 years old, which is a very popular age in the juvenile system, 10 and 11. We create that going back and forth to court and, appearing here and, now your parents have this fee to cover, that fee to cover. You just create that cycle of a kid who now could be a good student, could be sharp, but he or she just doesn't think that's possible because of being in the juvenile system, because they got in an argument with a teacher or resource officers tired of the same kid getting in trouble 3 or 4 times. That now they say, we're going to just put you in the system. And I thought it was interesting at the State House hearing Troy Brown talk. He talked about how, when he was a young kid in school, he had an issue with just going to the bathroom. And he said his parents would send him to school with 3 or 4 pairs of clothes sometimes. And he said he had to wear the same clothes sometimes at school. And he said he was late a lot because his mom had to work and he had to wait for his younger siblings to get on the bus. And he said, I was a clown in school. He said, I would get in trouble all the time. And he said, in the country in Mississippi, I went to the principal's office. Mm-hmm. He said, but I'm looking at some of these things, I would have clearly been a candidate to be in the juvenile system. And he said, I feel like I turned out all right being sent to the principal's office, but can't imagine where my life would have turned if I would have been in and out of the criminal justice system as a juvenile, having to go back and forth to court. And I thought that was just a prime example of you see a guy who's been a very positive influence on the community, obviously as a football player, but in many different ways, and still now, giving back to the community because he wasn't just thrown in the system and forgotten about, but, actually given a chance and dealt with the different things that were going on in his life, which were the cause, not, because he was a bad person and needed to be in and out of the system.
Mm-hmm. And you've had a lot of support from the Patriots organization, and I mean obviously the involvement of the top officials of the team itself in this issue. What has that been like? Sort of working with them on something outside of the game.
It's been awesome. I think it shows more of who they are as people. I think obviously in football, when it comes down to we all want to win, so. When that's the case, we're all doing anything that we have to do to win, and that's the goal. But now, this is real life. This is things that to me is what is in your heart. So to see them fully support and not just, they don't even just lend their name or say go. They want to be involved. Seeing Mr. Kraft, go all the way to visit Meek Mill and hear his story.
Right.
Me getting to talk to him, and he's telling me about the story, and he's passing on what he learned, and then going out there in the interview and just saying, the criminal justice system is wrong. We need to fix that. To me, shows how much they care and puts value in just being able to play for an organization like that, not just football-wise and being here and, winning and competing for Super Bowls, but I think actually, having value in saying, I play for a great organization, not just because of our tradition and winning, but because of the people involved and the people at the top all the way to the bottom. So to me, I've been very proud, to go out there and, whatever I'm involved with, it's always going to be associated as a member of the New England Patriots. I've been proud to have that along with my title.
And the Players Coalition that you've been part of and that's been working on a lot of these issues is a league-wide organization, is that right? That has funding to pursue broadly different causes or social justice causes?
Yeah, we have players. I would say we have about a little over 100 players probably participating in some form and capacity. Everyone's not all involved in everything. Some guys are specifically in their cities and they go to a couple different events. Then we have a task force, which I'm a part of, with 12 guys who, we met in Miami about a month ago to discuss different things we want to do moving forward. So it's been incredible just to see the passion throughout the league of different guys who want to create change and do things, and continually to try to spread throughout the league to get as many guys in the league as possible, and then hopefully be able to even venture outside just our sport and get this to where, all players and celebrities are using their platform, not just for great, medical causes and stuff like that, but, for a chance to improve the country we live in.
Right, and I know that. I've certainly seen some things written saying that they think that your role and using the visibility and the stature that you have with others, played a role on Beacon Hill in the consideration of that juvenile part of the bill.
Yeah, and that's what people were telling us, and I think we're using that going forward. In Sacramento, some players went and held a forum, for the DA races, just to help people understand the importance that the DA plays, and that the people in the community have a huge say. Like, you get to vote that.
Right.
So getting people to get involved in, whether it's they come just to see or meet the football player, but have to now sit through the forum and listen to the different candidates and get out there and vote, has been huge. So that's been big, seeing that in Sacramento, and being able to educate ourselves on the DA races and the different things. I thought learning about what a lot of those guys did in Philadelphia, getting Krausner in there,
Right.
was huge, because they kind of learned the importance of the DA races, and they were very involved in trying to help the community understand that importance, and getting them to go out there and vote. And it seems like he's been doing a great job of trying to help that community out. So it seems like they had great feedback on how they were able to get involved. And it wasn't for them backing a certain candidate, but just
Right.
getting people to go and learn and see how they can affect their own communities.
Right. Now that's been kind of a national campaign going on, and it's hit here in Boston, where Suffolk County is now in the midst of a big race for DA, with the current DA stepping down. So it's a pretty wide open race, and there's been the same kind of public information campaign to get people to understand how important it is. So what sort of role do you see going forward for yourself? I mean, you've had, as you said, this kind of one sort of step victory with that part of the bill. What do you plan to work on next?
Yeah, I think we keep trying to see what is relevant and important. So, like you said, with the DA races coming up, I believe in September, trying to see how we can get involved and getting people to understand that importance right here in Boston. So I would probably say that is the next step, going forward, just because that has great importance and value, to the city right now. And I think trying to figure out what's the best way to get involved with that. And then I think for us is continuing to educate ourselves. We want to go and watch bail hearings, just so we can see how that goes, because talking to guys that did that in Pennsylvania, they said it was very eye-opening, just sitting throughout the day and seeing different people come up, watching to see how the judge treated everyone. They said it was very interesting to see that. So that's something that we're interested as players to go see. It's funny because we're over here now trying to see how much we can cram in before the end of July comes and we get into training camp. So we're trying to see if we could just get all those things. But I would say between that and then the DA races, of trying to get involved in that in some way, hopefully soon.
And just lastly, I mean, how are you feeling? You being involved, more actively in these issues, about the whole question about how we're doing around race in the country. In some ways, we've seen the conversation get poisoned and very contentious. Certainly, Trump has made a lot of what people consider inflammatory remarks that some people have said have set things backwards. Yet there's a lot of other signs that you might say signs of optimism in terms of people stepping forward. So how do you size all that up in terms of where you think we're at right now?
Yeah, I think Trump has definitely made it an issue to everyone. I think it's always been an issue, but I think because of how outspoken he is and says whatever he wants, you see people support that. So I think there's probably been people who have felt that way for years, and they just stay in their little bubble, and now they have the confidence because he's a president of the United States, and if he says it, they're like, okay, this is okay. I can be out in public and feel this way and do. And I think on the converse side of that, you see people like, this is what we're dealing with. Like, we have to do something about this. Like, this is unacceptable. And I think now it's become more of an issue that is on the mainstream. And, I think before that, you have a lot of people, even to this day, that will say, I don't get what's the problem. There's no racism. There's no race issue, and they'll only look at because you were here and now you're here, so everything's done. Like, you should be happy about just that. And I think because of his remarks, you now have a conversation and a topic that has to be addressed, and people want to address it, and I think that state of, being comfortable, of talking about the uncomfortable things is more common now, whether it's doing a podcast like this or, hopefully throughout the NFL season, seeing different things that players are doing in communities. So people who want to just watch football can't help but see, those different things. I think that's a big step of race in our country on a whole. There's no sport or anything watch more than the Super Bowl. And, I think continuing to see things build up and then seeing things around that game deal with race, I think hits people right in their face of having to deal with it and hear about it and hear all different perspectives and sides from it.
Well, with that, I thank you so much, Devin McCourty, for letting us be one little part of that conversation and coming in here and talking with us.
I appreciate, what you guys do on a whole, and I'm happy to play a small part of trying to push it forward, but it's having podcasts like this and doing things on the regular and giving me a platform and an outlet to come and talk. So I appreciate it.
Well, great. And so you have been listening to another installment of the Codcast from Commonwealth Magazine. I'm Michael Jonas. You can listen to us every week. You can subscribe via SoundCloud or iTunes. Thanks again to Devin McCourty. Good luck in the year ahead. Good luck with your new baby. and we'll see you again next time.
Thank you.